Private First Class Marcus Sullivan felt his stomach lurch as the C-47 transport aircraft shuddered violently, hit by German anti-aircraft fire over the Normandy coastline. At 23 years old, he was one of 13,000 American paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions preparing to jump into occupied France during the opening hours of D-Day. But as tracer rounds tore through the aircraft's thin aluminum skin and the red jump light illuminated in the cargo bay, Marcus had no idea that he was about to experience one of the most extraordinary, isolated combat actions of the entire Normandy invasion. The mission plan had seemed straightforward during briefings at the staging area in England. Marcus's stick of 18 paratroopers would jump from 500 feet altitude, land in designated drop zones near the town of Saint-Mère-Église, assemble with other elements of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and secure key bridges and crossroads to prevent German reinforcements from reaching the invasion beaches. The operation was scheduled to begin at 1:30 a.m. on June 6th, with paratroopers landing in darkness to achieve maximum surprise against German defensive forces. But the reality of combat airborne operations bore little resemblance to the orderly procedures practiced during training exercises. German anti-aircraft fire had disrupted the transport aircraft formations, forcing pilots to take evasive action that scattered paratroopers across the Norman countryside, miles from their intended drop zones. The thick cloud cover that provided concealment for the approaching aircraft also prevented pilots from accurately identifying landmarks, contributing to further navigational errors that would disperse American paratroopers over hundreds of square miles. Marcus had grown up in rural Montana, the son of a cattle rancher who had taught him self-reliance, practical problem-solving, and the ability to function effectively in isolated situations where help might be hours or days away. His background had made him well-suited for airborne infantry service, which required soldiers who could operate independently after being scattered across enemy territory with minimal equipment and uncertain communications with friendly forces. His training with the 82nd Airborne Division had been rigorous and comprehensive, emphasizing the specialized skills required for combat parachute operations. He had learned to pack and inspect his own parachute, to execute proper exit techniques from aircraft traveling at high speeds, to control his descent and landing in various wind conditions, and to assemble scattered units using recognition signals and rally procedures. But no training could fully prepare soldiers for the chaos of actual combat jumps into heavily defended territory. As Marcus stood in the door of his C-47, waiting for the green light that would signal his jump, he could see other transport aircraft being hit by German anti-aircraft fire, some bursting into flames and falling from the sky with their full loads of paratroopers who would never reach the ground alive. What would you do if you were about to jump into darkness over enemy territory, knowing you might land completely alone? The green light illuminated at 1:47 a.m., 17 minutes late due to the evasive maneuvers that had thrown off the aircraft's timing and positioning. Marcus launched himself into the night sky over Normandy, immediately experiencing the violent shock of his parachute deploying at lower altitude than training jumps had used. The reduced jump height was necessary to minimize time paratroopers spent vulnerable while descending, but it also meant Marcus had only seconds to assess his landing area and prepare for impact. As Marcus descended through the darkness, he could see tracer rounds arcing across the sky and explosions illuminating the ground below. The landscape visible in brief flashes looked nothing like the aerial photographs he had studied during mission briefings. Instead of the flat agricultural fields near Saint-Mère-Église, he appeared to be descending toward Bocage country, the distinctive Norman landscape of small fields divided by thick hedgerows and earthen banks that would make navigation and unit assembly extraordinarily difficult. Marcus's landing was hard and awkward, with his parachute catching in a tall hedgerow that left him suspended several feet above the ground. Standard procedure required cutting away the parachute harness and dropping to the ground, but Marcus could hear German voices nearby and realized that making noise during his landing could alert enemy forces to his position. He remained suspended in the hedgerow for several minutes, listening to German soldiers moving along a nearby road while he slowly and silently cut himself free from his parachute harness. Once on the ground, Marcus quickly assessed his situation. He had no idea where he had landed relative to his intended drop zone, had not seen any other American paratroopers during his descent, and could hear German forces moving throughout the area. His immediate priorities were to avoid detection, determine his location, and attempt to link up with other American forces who might be equally scattered and disoriented. Marcus's equipment inventory revealed both advantages and limitations for operating alone behind enemy lines. He carried his M1 Garand rifle with 80 rounds of ammunition, 4 hand grenades, a combat knife, emergency rations for 3 days, medical supplies including morphine and sulfur powder, a compass, map, and limited communications equipment, including a cricket clicker used for recognition signals between scattered paratroopers. But Marcus had lost his musette bag during the jump, which meant he lacked additional ammunition, demolition charges he had been assigned to carry, and the radio equipment that would have allowed communication with other American units. His isolation was both physical and informational. He had no way to know how many other paratroopers had landed successfully, whether the main invasion force had begun landing on the beaches, or what tactical objectives remained achievable given the obvious dispersal of airborne forces. Have you ever been completely alone in a dangerous situation with no backup and uncertain information?
Marcus spent the first hour after landing conducting careful reconnaissance of his immediate area, moving slowly through the hedgerows while listening for sounds that might indicate friendly or enemy forces. The distinctive landscape of the bocage provided both advantages and disadvantages for isolated operations. The thick vegetation offered excellent concealment, but it also limited visibility to just a few yards and made navigation extraordinarily difficult. As dawn began to break, Marcus finally determined his approximate location using his map and compass, combined with terrain features he could identify from high ground. He was approximately 8 miles southeast of his intended drop zone, in an area that intelligence briefings had indicated was held by elements of the German 91st Infantry Division. More significantly, he was positioned near a critical crossroads that connected inland German positions with coastal defensive units that would attempt to counterattack the invasion beaches once D-Day began. The realization that he had accidentally landed near such a strategically important position created both opportunity and enormous danger. If Marcus could observe German forces using this crossroads and potentially interdict their movements, he might contribute to the invasion's success, despite being completely isolated from other American forces. But attempting such operations alone against what could be significant German forces would likely result in his death or capture. Marcus's decision reflected both his training and his Montana background, which had taught him that sometimes individuals must act independently when circumstances prevent coordination with larger forces. He would establish an observation position near the crossroads, gather intelligence about German troop movements, and attempt to disrupt those movements through small unit tactics that might delay German reinforcements from reaching the invasion beaches. The observation position Marcus selected was in a thick hedgerow overlooking the crossroads from approximately 200 yards distance. The position provided excellent concealment, clear lines of sight to the intersection, and multiple escape routes if German forces discovered his presence. Marcus settled into the position just as German military traffic began using the crossroads in what appeared to be routine morning activity. What Marcus observed over the next several hours provided crucial insights into German defensive responses to the Allied invasion. Contrary to intelligence estimates that had predicted German forces would remain in defensive positions, awaiting clear indication of Allied intentions, the units Marcus observed were moving aggressively toward the coastline, suggesting that German commanders had decided to launch immediate counterattacks against the invasion beaches once D-Day began. Share your thoughts in the comments below about making tactical decisions when you're alone with no orders. The German forces using the crossroads included infantry units, self-propelled artillery, and most significantly, armored vehicles, including several Panzer IV tanks that represented serious threats to lightly equipped American airborne forces. The scale and speed of German movements suggested that Marcus had accidentally positioned himself along a major German approach route toward the invasion beaches, making his isolated position strategically significant beyond anything he could have planned. Marcus's first interdiction action came at approximately 10 a.m. when a German supply convoy halted at the crossroads, while officers consulted maps and issued orders to subordinate units. From his concealed position 200 yards away, he had clear shots at the officers, who appeared to be coordinating the convoy's movements toward the coast. The decision to engage represented a calculated risk that could either disrupt German operations or reveal Marcus's position and result in overwhelming retaliation. But his training emphasized that airborne forces were expected to take aggressive action against enemy forces, even when isolated and outnumbered, understanding that individual initiative could influence tactical outcomes when larger operations had been disrupted by the chaos of combat operations. Marcus's first shots killed 2 German officers and wounded a third, creating immediate confusion in the convoy as soldiers scrambled for cover and attempted to identify the source of the unexpected attack. The German response was rapid and violent. Machine guns opened fire toward Marcus's approximate position. Mortar rounds began falling in the hedgerows where they believed the sniper was hiding, and infantry began moving to encircle what they assumed was a larger American force. But Marcus had already displaced to a secondary position 100 yards from his original location, using techniques he had learned during training for operating in the Normandy bocage. The thick hedgerows allowed him to move without being observed, while the Germans' assumption that they were facing multiple attackers rather than a single isolated paratrooper caused them to deploy forces defensively rather than continuing their movement toward the coast. The delay Marcus had created through his attack was modest, perhaps 30 minutes while German forces cleared the area and reorganized their convoy. But in the context of D-Day operations where Allied forces were desperately fighting to establish beachheads before German reinforcements could arrive, even 30-minute delays could prove tactically significant. Marcus understood that his isolated actions, multiplied by similar disruptions caused by other scattered paratroopers, could cumulatively influence whether the invasion succeeded or failed. Marcus continued his independent operations throughout June 6th, conducting hit-and-run attacks against German forces using the crossroads, while carefully managing his limited ammunition supply. Each attack caused delays, created confusion about the size and location of American forces, and forced German commanders to divert resources toward what they believed were significant airborne threats in their rear areas. Let us know in the comments what you think about the courage required to fight alone against overwhelming odds. The most significant action Marcus conducted occurred late on June 6th, when German armored forces attempted to use the crossroads for a coordinated counterattack against American positions near Utah Beach. The armored column included 6 Panzer IV tanks, supporting infantry and self-propelled artillery, far more firepower than a single isolated paratrooper could possibly challenge through direct engagement.
But Marcus's Montana ranching background had taught him that small actions could influence large systems if applied at critical points where leverage exceeded simple force comparisons. Rather than attempting hopeless direct attacks against armored vehicles, Marcus used his 4 remaining hand grenades to block the crossroads by destroying a stone bridge that the tanks would need to cross to continue their advance. The bridge demolition required Marcus to approach within grenade-throwing range of German security forces protecting the armored column, a maneuver that would almost certainly be detected and result in his death or capture. But he also understood that destroying the bridge could delay the German counterattack by hours while engineers found alternative routes or repair the damage. Marcus's approach to the bridge used every infiltration technique he had learned during airborne training, combined with patience and careful timing that allowed him to reach throwing range of the bridge without being detected by German sentries. His 4 grenades damaged the bridge sufficiently to make it impassable for heavy armored vehicles, forcing the German column to halt while engineers assessed the damage and planned alternative routes. The immediate German response to the bridge demolition was exactly what Marcus had expected. Intensive searching of the area by infantry forces convinced that they were facing a significant American presence rather than a single isolated soldier. But Marcus had already withdrawn to a hide position over 400 yards from the bridge, where he remained concealed while German forces conducted their search operations. The delay Marcus had created through the bridge demolition exceeded 4 hours as German engineers worked to create a bypass route for the armored column. Those 4 hours proved crucial for American forces fighting to secure and expand their beachheads at Utah Beach, providing time to bring additional forces ashore and establish defensive positions that would resist the German counterattack when it finally arrived. Marcus's independent operations continued for 3 days as he conducted reconnaissance, interdicted German movements, and gradually worked his way toward American lines while avoiding German security forces searching for the isolated paratroopers who had been causing disruptions throughout the area. His survival during this period required constant vigilance, careful resource management, and the physical and mental endurance necessary to function effectively while operating alone in enemy territory. On June 9th, Marcus finally made contact with other American forces, not his own 82nd Airborne Division, but elements of the 4th Infantry Division that had landed at Utah Beach and were advancing inland to link up with scattered airborne units. His debriefing provided tactical intelligence about German defensive positions, troop movements, and the locations of other isolated American paratroopers who were still operating independently throughout the Normandy countryside. The recognition of Marcus's achievement came gradually as after-action reports began documenting the extent to which scattered paratroopers had disrupted German defensive responses during the critical first days of the Normandy invasion. His isolated actions at a single strategic crossroads had contributed to delays that cumulatively influenced German inability to mount effective counterattacks against the invasion beaches during the period when American forces were most vulnerable. Marcus received the Distinguished Service Cross for his 3-day independent operation behind enemy lines, with a citation recognizing his extraordinary heroism and tactical initiative in conducting sustained combat operations while completely isolated from friendly forces, directly contributing to the success of Allied invasion operations. But the more meaningful recognition came from the soldiers who had landed at Utah Beach and understood that their survival had been made possible by isolated paratroopers like Marcus, who had delayed German reinforcements during the invasion's most critical hours. Marcus returned to combat operations with the 82nd Airborne Division, participating in subsequent airborne operations in Holland and Germany. His experience as an isolated paratrooper influenced his approach to all subsequent combat operations, emphasizing individual initiative and the understanding that small unit actions could influence strategic outcomes when applied with tactical insight and unwavering determination. Sullivan survived the war and returned to Montana, where he resumed ranching operations and rarely discussed his military service except with fellow veterans who understood the realities of airborne combat operations. His isolated 3-day operation behind enemy lines on D-Day remained largely unknown outside military history circles until researchers began documenting the extraordinary individual actions that had contributed to the invasion's success. Today, the crossroads where Marcus conducted his isolated operations is marked with a small memorial recognizing the American paratroopers who fought in that area during the opening days of the Normandy campaign. Marcus's name appears alongside dozens of others who demonstrated similar courage and initiative while operating alone or in small groups behind enemy lines, creating cumulative disruptions that proved crucial for invasion success. Private First Class Marcus Sullivan proved that individual courage, tactical initiative, and unwavering determination could influence strategic outcomes even when conventional coordination and support were impossible. His 3-day isolated operation behind enemy lines demonstrated that sometimes the most important contributions to military victory come not from large organized forces, but from individuals who refuse to surrender initiative even when completely alone in enemy territory. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to share your thoughts.